Well, episode 12. Um, I got so you know what I always wonder what I'm going to talk about. So today I've tried to be a little bit more prepared. The last episode 11 was kind of choppy and like I said at the end or towards the end, I was having a rough time that week. Like circumstances haven't changed, but you learn to cope. You learn to deal with, not just cope, but to deal with it. Either that or you plunge into depression, which apparently right now there's a lot of people suffering with depression. Now, having sadness is one thing, feelings of being depressed are another. But when I say they're in depression, it's a deep thing. It's it's more than just I feel sad, you know. And the problem is we tend to want to dwell on things, and it's good to examine, but not always good to dwell. Sorry, take a drink of water. I should have done that before. So I want to talk about. I'm going to get back to that later. I want to talk about the some stuff that happened in my childhood before I came to Canada. Before I ever took LSD, my mom was. I grew up in like until I was 11 in Birmingham, Alabama. I was born there and lived there in the 60s. It was tumultuous. It was a tumultuous time in the South. It was a tumultuous time all over the country. It's always a tumultuous time, apparently. We have very few moments in our history, our recent history, or maybe even all of our history, where there's not a lot of conflict and, you know, pain and anger and division. You know, it goes in waves. Anyway, my mom marched with Martin Luther King. She marched in the Selma March. She knew Martin Luther King, though how well I wouldn't be able to say the same as Jesse Jackson and Ralph Abernathy and a lot of those guys that were, you know, Jackson was just a young man, maybe you know, maybe just learning the ropes from MLK, and I don't think he learned very well, honestly. But Ralph Abernathy was probably more of a mentor to Martin Luther King. They were both, all three of them, but the primary two, Ralph Abernathy and Martin Luther King, were both Baptist ministers. And my beliefs from reading their writings and history about them and listening to speeches from Martin Luther King is that this man understood Christianity. He understood what it was about, more so than most. A lot of people wear the label of Christian, but they don't really carry it. Anyway, my mom believed in the equality of the races. She fought for her whole life. To some degree or another, according to her, even when she was a teenager, she stood up for the rights of the black population of Birmingham, Alabama. I don't know if you saw the movie The Help, but that was the culture that I was raised in. I had a maid. My mom had a maid. That's what we had. That was just a fact of life. So when I never set my timer again. I always forget to do that. When when I was 9, my mom worked to, so that would have been 1957 when I was 9, or 67. I mean, my mom worked to get me and my brother Steve into a camp up in Vermont called the Farm and Wilderness Camp, summer camps. They were run by a Quaker man, an idealistic Quaker fellow that he bought a lake up in Vermont. He bought the whole property that surrounded the lake, and he established 3 camps. He had what he called the Indian camp or a native camp, where the young men it was purely for men, that camp, would come and live as First Nations, or as he perceived First Nations lived. Learn to forage and stuff like that. I didn't go to that camp. My brother Steve went to that camp. He could talk better about what that one was. The camp that I went to was a pioneers camp, so it was a farm. We learned farming and ranching and whatever, that kind of stuff. We didn't have animals, so there was no ranching. It was really basically farming and survival techniques, like if you got lost in the woods, which is probably the same kind of stuff that Steve was learning, but they were wearing loincloths and living in teepees, and we were in camp. We were in cabins. Steve learned beadwork. I learned wood burning or whatever, whatever it was. Anyway, it was, we had to, my mom ended up getting a grant for both of us to go. I think Steve went in 66. I think he went 3 years. I only went 2, 67 and 68. In 67, when we went up there, part of the way my mom found out about this camp was from Ralph Abernathy. He was sending his son, who I think his name was Ralph too, to the camp. And Ralph Jr. was my age or a year younger. I can't remember exactly. And so we both, in 1967, we were both at the camp. And then in 68, when it was time to go back to the camp, Ralph Abernathy's son didn't come that year, because that was the year 68 was the year that Martin Luther King was assassinated. Okay, so it was earlier in that, than in April or May. April, I think he was assassinated in April of 1968. So I mean, that was great sadness for tons of people, and still to this day we still have a sadness about the death of a man who lived and preached peace. Now, he was by no means a perfect man, and we can get into that maybe a little later too, because none of us are. None of us reach that perfection. At these camps, anyway, like I said, I learned farming and survival techniques. And every year we would grow our own food, and at the end of the year we would have a banquet. And so it was, I think it was a month. It might have been a 6-week long camp. It was long. It wasn't just a couple of weeks, if I remember correctly, because we actually grew stuff. And in the fall, at the end, we had a big banquet. And like both years that I went, there was this huge amount of corn on the cob. Like basically that's what we ate at the banquet, was corn on the cob. Just as much as you could eat, fresh picked corn on the cob, slathered in butter and salt. And we made our own root beer there, and we made our own Mountain Dew. And the Mountain Dew was really good, like way different and the root beer, they were both way different than the stuff you buy. We made it from, well, it wasn't a kit. We made it from scratch. I don't remember what was in Mountain Dew. But it was yummy. Both of those were yummy. They were good. And so that was in 60. There was this big bonfire, and every year they tried to outdo the year before in the way that they started the bonfire. And the first year, it was a series of burning arrows were shot into this huge bonfire, which was pretty impressive. But the second year, 68, that bonfire was a cable. There was a cable strung up, and there was a dog house built with an effigy of Snoopy the dog on it, and they lit the back, and they lit the back of the doghouse on fire, and it came down into the pile of rubbish, and it was probably smothered in gasoline, because as soon as it hit, or diesel or something, as soon as it hit the fire, the whole thing, the bonfire rubbish, the whole thing burst into fire. It was kind of funny. Snoopy's doghouse on fire. Anyway, another thing that happened in 68, which was kind of bizarre, and I should have looked this up, but I think it was 68 or 67 when Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band came out, and there's a part in that where he's there. There's like a circus caller going, um, describing what's going to happen in Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and then all of a sudden and let me introduce to you the one and only Billy Shears, Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. In camp in '68, there was a young guy my age whose name was Billy Shears. I remember clearly because he got razzed a bit about it because the album was either within a year had come out. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, it was kind of funny. And another thing I remember about Billy Shears is on one of our hikes, one of the hikes that we had through the woods. This Billy Shears, we were walking across a log, and he was, I think, the first person to step on this log, or he fell off the log. Anyway, inside the log was a bee's nest, and like he went through the bee's nest, and the bees just swarmed out and totally attacked him. It wrecked our hike. It wrecked probably the rest of his summer. I don't remember that, but he was sent home with multiple bee stings, and I don't remember if he had a serious allergic reaction or not, but whatever. So that was interesting. That was an interesting thing, and to talk about my mom's belief system a little bit at that time, it created It created difficulties for us at times. She was a member of the Unitarian Church. At that time, it was just called the Unitarian Church. Now they call it the Universalist Unitarian Church, or Unitarian Universalist, or something like that. They were Universalist then. They believed basically all religions were the same, and they all had the same, message or whatever. They all stood on equal ground. Hence universal. You can check it out if you want. You may already have checked it out and have formed an opinion. But anyway, I didn't know at that time, but later, after I became a Christian, I began to understand quite critically the fallacy in that. I mean, it can't be true. First of all, the leaders of all the religions, they all like, that's one of the things that Christianity gets lambasted with: exclusivity all the time. That you're exclusive. Well, they're all exclusive. Every single religion, faith in the world has exclusive faith claims or whatever. And so then we enter into postmodernity, which I don't want to go too deeply in that. Maybe I'll run another podcast just for talking about that kind of stuff, like I've thought about. I think I mentioned it last time too. But there is one thing I wanted to point out about who Jesus was, and how getting to know him at an early age, and getting to interface with him without preconceived ideas, probably at the beginning of the end of the Christian the country, the U.S. being a Christian nation. So it was the beginning of the end of that. I haven't read any kind of Bible stuff at all yet, but I wanna read something. I've got it on my computer. I'm over here. It says it's Luke 12, which you should read the whole chapter if you have the intestinal fortitude to do so. But I just want to read from 49 to 53, and Jesus says he didn't come to the earth to bring peace. Like, that's one of the things. I want to tell you that he did bring peace. He does bring peace, but that wasn't the primary mission at his first coming. That wasn't why he came. He said in this passage, "I came to cast fire on the earth, and I would that it were already kindled. I have a baptism to be baptized with, and how great is my distress until it is accomplished." So here's Jesus talking about what he's come to do. "Do you think that I have come to give peace on earth? Question mark. No, I tell you, but rather division. From now on, in the house where 5 where there will be five divided, three against two and two against three. They will be divided, father against son, and son against father, and mother against daughter, and daughter against mother, and mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and sisters and brothers, and whatever I had. I just kept going after that because that's the fact. Like, even families, never mind the division we see in the world, in our own country, in our own city, in our own province, in our own continent, in our own the Western world, and then the rest of the world. Never mind those divisions. It's back to subsidiarity again, back to the smallest of governments, our families. There's division in our families. And it's because, like, the division I'm talking about is strictly because of this belief in Christ. So either you believe he is who he said he is, or he was a liar, lunatic, or it's either liar, lunatic, or God. That's what C.S. Lewis said. It's liar, lunatic, or God. You believe it or you don't. That's the way it comes down to. If you do think to go and read that passage, Luke 12:49 to 53, continue on reading for 54 to 56, because it's pertinent to our age, to our time as well. The thing is, when I said Jesus didn't come to bring peace, he does bring peace, but that wasn't why he came. He came to cast a fire of judgment on the earth. So that was the beginning. That was the beginning of the judgment. Now we all like, I was talking about judgment last time, and I got a lot of sympathy stuff, and I thank you. I appreciate the sympathy, and it's encouraging to know that people are listening and watching and want to encourage me. That I thank you so much for that, and it breeds a strong sense of affection. Like, the people that reach out to me, I feel affectionately drawn to you now. So thank you. But there is something else I wanted to quote from C.S. Lewis, and it came out of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Let's see if I can read it. I wrote it in pencil, which probably wasn't the best idea. So The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Mr. Beaver, when he's talking about Aslan. Now, Aslan in The Lion, the Witch, and Wardrobe, Aslan is a prototype, a stereotype of Jesus. Okay, the Son of God, the Lion. And the way that he's presented in the Chronicles of Narnia is really cool. Like, C.S. Lewis does a great job. But there's one point when I think it was Lucy. He was talking to Lucy, and she says, "Is he safe? Is Aslan safe?" And Mr. Beaver says, "Who said anything about safe? Of course he isn't safe, but he's good." And that's where we draw this line. We differentiate between judgment and fear and mercy. It gets complicated again. I don't know if I have enough time to go into it, but the fact of the matter is, nobody else, no other spiritual leader of any of the main religions, of the world's biggest and most predominant religions, none of them ever came and said, "Hey, I'm God. I'm the Son of God. I've come to save you. You need to look at me." They all came and did something different than that. They came and said, "I'm not the one. I only point the way. I only have a message, or I've found this rock, or whatever. I found this tablet, or whatever it is, however it is." None of them live up to the claims of Jesus. And that's part of the reason why he's so hated, and yet part of the reason why even those who are from other faiths are drawn to him. There's a difference about what he says and who he says he is. It's a different story completely. If you read the Old Testament compared to just about any other holy books, although some of the Indian holy books are pretty full of stories that are really interesting, most of them they're not the same. Anyway, I talked about that in my last podcast, that you should, if you should take some time and look at that, look at the Bible. what I want to say is, it comes down to this. You can't be neutral. I said that. It's either liar, lunatic, or God. We all long for judgment. I spoke about judgment last time in mercy, and it got a little cloudy what I was saying, and I'd love to clear that up. It's not that I don't think I have time right now to do that, but maybe. The fact of the matter is we all long for judgment. Not judgment, for justice. We long for justice. And without judgment, there is no justice. So we talk about love, love, love. We crave justice. I mean, what's happening in the U.S., Black Lives Matter. There's a desire for justice. There's this craving for justice. Black Lives Matter is defunct. It was false. It was whatever. I don't want to get into that. Or Hamas and Israel calling for justice. When we look at justice, if we try to do it on our own, we're headed for trouble, because that's just going to incur more judgment. And the fact is that there is a judgment. There has to be a judgment. And this is the thing that another thing that Christians get burned for. They get slagged for. This believing in a judgment. How can a loving God judge? Well, he has to. I tried to say that last time. There has to be that. If there's no judgment, then what hope is there? You don't have any hope. The world has no hope. If there's no judgment, there's no way for justice. So if there is judgment, what happens then? Well, then, if there is judgment, then there's no hope for me. What am I going to do? I know I said last time, I know that I don't live up to my own standards, never mind other people's standards. That's what I was talking about last time when I said I'm not a good father, I'm not a good husband, I'm not a good friend. Like, in my life, there's times where I'm a good father, I'm a good friend, and I'm a good husband. But there's times when I'm not. And one time of not being all that I need to be in any of those roles, then judgment is required. Judgment is required for justice to take place. That is the point. That's what I was trying to say then. Hopefully I'm making it clearer now. Last time I was a little more emotional. I'm a little bit lighter this time, So basically here Jesus is saying, I didn't come to bring peace. He does bring peace. When you find out who he is, when you discover who he is and enter into a relationship with him, that's when the peace comes. And it's not, the exclusivity doesn't breed for arrogance. It's not a catalyst for arrogance. If you become arrogant because you are saved, then you're not saved. You don't know Christ if there's an arrogance in that. Because because of what I just said, I require that I be judged. So this mercy thing, this is when I said last time someone has to pay, that's why Jesus came. That was the fire to cast judgment, to bring fire upon the earth. That's what fire in the Old Testament, if you read it, and even in the New Testament, when they talk about fire, it's for purification, it's for cleansing, it's for judgment. It's for judgment. It signifies judgment. Okay, so when you understand these things, you it has to affect you. Okay, so back to that thing I said last time, which I should probably say every time. If there's anything in what I say, and it's not me, it's the Holy Spirit that's pulling you, drawing you, tugging on you. I said piercing you last time. If there's anything that rings true in this, then you need to look at it. You need to examine it. You need to put aside any presuppositions you have about what Christianity is, what Jesus taught, what churches teach, what anybody teaches. Like, there's good stuff in the churches. I'm not slagging the churches. Not just to slag the churches. It's just that they're people too, and we all have that same imperfect episodes. Put a bunch of imperfect people together, and you're gonna have. It's back to what I talked about being in grade 7. All the 13-year-olds all together locked up in a room. Like you got the same thing in churches. You got the same thing in communities. You got the same thing. So some way, somehow, you got to find a way to live and exist in peace, in that peace. And it's an inner peace. You have to have it on the inside because there is going to be no outer peace. We can call peace, peace, peace. We can come up with solutions like socialism or Marxism or capitalism or whatever. Those are ideas, and they have some basis in truth maybe, and they have some positive things going for them, but they're not the truth. There's one the truth according to Jesus, and either he's a liar or a lunatic or he's God because he said he was God. So that either he's a liar because he said he was God, or he's just plain crazy. Like what was that guy Jonestown? He said he was Christ returned. Like that's not the world's major religions. That's what happens to people who claim to be God. They go crazy. They're lunatics. Jesus changed the world. He changed. I talked about Christendom. I think I did. I think I mentioned it last time. He changed the world. So if he changed the world, then we must all be lunatics if he's a lunatic because we all bought into it. I mean, there's so many critical thinking arguments to go through here. I really like if you have any questions you want to talk to me about into this stuff, please contact me because I'm salivating to talk about it. I really am. I'm anxious to talk about it. Anyway, I guess that's it. I don't know how much time I spent here, probably more than 15 minutes. And I'm going to do a song, and again, I don't know which one. It will be an original, or that's my plan. Hopefully, a new one. I can get it done well enough that I don't mind sharing it with you. So that's number 12. Number 13 is next. And next week, I have dental surgery. So I'm going to try and get number 13 recorded before that. It took me all day to edit, like literally like 8 hours or more to edit last week. I don't have the skill sets. I guess I'm developing them, but it's a time suck. And I'm totally, I'm into it. I'm into doing it. And I will share more with you next time. Again, thank you. Until next time. Oh, that whole thing I didn't record.